US as refugees and so on, when they were asked, when were you born? They were like, I don't know. So they were, January 1st it is. So what does that tell you? That even now, many people don't know. My grandmother didn't know her age. And you would ask her, how old are you? She's like, I'm not sure. Well, I was born 3 years after this person, and at the time when this person got married, I was this old, I think, so about that age. Don't know. So like that, Aisha radiyallahu anha herself, in Sahih Muslim, she gives the time of her engagement of 7 years. In Sahih Bukhari, she gives 6 years, both Sahih hadith. So it means that it wasn't something they were very sure about. Not a weak hadith, not anything wrong with her memory, but she's going off of knowledge or information other people gave her. What we do know for sure is that she was already engaged. When she was married to the Prophet ﷺ, she was already engaged. That means according to the customs and traditions of the time, this is the age a woman would get married. When a person should get married depends on certain factors. In America, for example, depending on what state you live in, you have to be 18 or 16 or 21 or so on. But where do those numbers come from? And how long have we had those numbers, right? Why? When you're physically ready, and there are some signs, I'm not going to get into details how you know when you're physically ready. What's stopping you from getting married? We're here, like, well, you still got high school to go through, you haven't, for brothers, they're like, oh, you're not a doctor yet, you haven't finished 3 PhDs, you don't own 3 houses, like, I don't know what kind of nonsense people make up, right? But the reality is that biologically, there are some factors that tell you that you're ready. And in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and in Western countries, at very young ages, they're engaging in the actions of married people. I don't want to elaborate, you're smart enough, you'll figure that out. Yeah? But they don't want to get you married. So people in middle school are engaging in things that only married people should be doing. But if they legally want to get married, like, no. You can do the stuff, but you can't, right? I used to go to a middle school that had a daycare. It was a middle school with a daycare, right? You're like, right? So this is hypocrisy, right? Why would you then allow that type of behavior if they're not ready for marriage? Right? That's behavior that's supposed to be after marriage. But whether it's your period or whether it is some other factors, there are physical factors that tell you you're ready for marriage. In other societies, when you have those factors, how else you get married? They don't have high school, they don't have middle school, they don't have to go to undergrad and overgrad and all this kind of stuff, right? Postgrad, this and that. They get married. Young men in those cultures sometimes get married at 12. Most of our 12-year-olds in America wouldn't be ready for marriage. But that's because our time. And to judge an earlier time by our standards, it's called prejudice. It's not a fair judgment, right? I'll give you an example. Right now there's an election coming up. Right? Probably going to be Trump and Biden, if Biden lives that long and Trump doesn't go to jail. Right? Great. If one of the two was a slave owner, he owned African slaves and beat them and raped them, you think he would win? You think they would put his face on money? Would they make a statue or a figure of him on Mount Rushmore? Well, if you do go to Mount Rushmore and look at those faces, if you take your dollar bill out, the one whose face on it did exactly that. George Washington, and I believe Thomas Jefferson as well, but George Washington for sure, owned slaves, and he beat slaves, and he raped slaves. This is history, you can look it up. Right? But today, we call him the father of America. We have a President's Day for, I don't know, his birthday, that's it, I don't know what it is, right? You take out the dollar bill, he's on it. When you Mount Rushmore, you see his face. And if we say, hey, that's a slave owner, right? They say, hey. At that time it was legal, so don't judge him. Okay? So, when we look at what is legal and allowed in the United States, I want to present a book, and I have it with me, but I'll share it on the screen as well. This is an interesting book. It's written by a non-Muslim, a professor, Carol Coca, yeah, which talks about the politics of statutory rape laws in the United States. And in this book, you can get it online if you want to, they have some very interesting charts. I'm going to share one here with you. And the reason I like to have the actual book is because if you tell people, sometimes people are like, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, how do I know this and that? But when you show somebody a book, they have to accept it to be what it is. You guys see it? Yeah. On page 23, it has the years that a person was legally allowed to get married in the United States. And that's very important. It starts here in 1885, which again is rather recent, less than 200 years ago, right? My math's about, right? In comparison to more than 1400 years ago, in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in the United States, and even if you're an atheist or agnostic, you would have, if you're in America, you would have to say that in Delaware, for example, at 7 years of age, you could legally get married. I don't mean engaged, because Aisha radiallahu anha, even if you look at the hadith in al-Bukhari and Muslim, at 6 or 7 was only the engagement in a sense of marriage, not in the way that you live with a person. They waited till she was physically ready, whether it was at 9 or 10 according to some narrations, and older according to others and whatever, until she was physically ready to be married, then they consummated the marriage. But here at 7 years of age, you could consummate the marriage in America. Others were at 10 or 12 and so on. Some of them had none. For example, Alaska, up until 1920s, had no minimum age. And the span in years, you can see coming up afterwards and continuing on the next page, the majority of America, around 7 to 10 years of age, 10 or 12 years of age, they would get married and consummate their marriage. So the age of Aisha radiallahu anha, even 200 years ago, would have been the norm in American society, right? If she was engaged at 6 or 7 and married at 9 or 10, that would be the norm. Now, if you go back now 1400 years ago, more than that, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was married to Aisha radiallahu anha, obviously that society was even at a time where lifespans weren't the same as they are today, right? People, once they were physically married, men and women, they would get married and they would live their life. This idea of waiting till 18 and 20 is a very recent idea, right? Now, that's one thing. But let's talk about religious figures and scripture. One of the well-known figures in Christianity, in Judaism, in Islam, is Ishaq alayhi salam, Isaac, right? And according to the Bible, he was married to who? Rebecca. Right? Now, I'm going to show you here so this thing lets me. A book, and this is a commentary on the Old Testament, actually the Torah, most of it. And the Torah is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So accordingly, Jews and Christians claim to believe in this, in the Torah. Rashi is a famous Jewish rabbi and a commentator, one of the most accepted. Rashi is an acronym from his name. You can look him up. Christian and Jewish scholars alike quote from him and reference him. He's one of the most accepted. Like when we talk about Ibn Kathir as a mufassir in Islamic, like everybody accepts Ibn Kathir kind of a thing. Rashi is like that for the Torah. What does he write about the marriage of Ishaq and Rebecca, now this is not according to Islam, by the way. This is according to Jewish and Christian tradition. The Torah in the Old Testament is accepted by both. Now, he gives the references, and you can read here. I can give you the scan. You can buy the book as well. I have it myself. He says, for when Abraham came from the Mount of Moriah after the binding of Isaac, and then he gives the Hebrew here as well, and the references from the Bible. All of it from the Bible, by the way. Not his opinion, he gives references. He was informed that Rebecca was born. So when Abraham came back, he was informed that Rebecca was born. Isaac was 37 years old at that time. When Rebecca was born, how old was Isaac?
30.
According to the Christians and Jews. 37.
30.
And then he's got the reference right there. As it was for the juncture that Sarah died. That's when Sarah died, and he gives the Hebrew right there. And from the time of Isaac was born until the binding, when Sarah died, there were 37 years, for she was 90 years old when Isaac was born. And he gives the references there. And 127 years when she died, according to the Bible, not according to us. As it says, and he gives the reference there. Sarah's lifetime was, and then she gives it. He continues on in the next page. And I gave both pages because I wanted to look at the references that he gives. When Sarah died, and at the juncture Rebecca was born, he waited for her until she was, you're going to have me pronounce this, Halakhanakali? This is a kha, right, the chat? Halakhali? The Sharia. Halakhali? The Sharia, according to Jewish, and again, because Christians believe this to be also from God, Christian tradition, fit for relation, not just marriage, for actual relations, which was what? 3 years old. And he married her. So according to the Bible, Christians and Jews both profess to believe in the Old Testament, in the Torah, Isaac married Rebecca when she was 3 years old, and according to their law, that was the age that she can physically be married and be fit for marital relations. Islam, we would not agree with that. You would not allow a marriage to a 3-year-old. We do not believe that's correct. But when Christians and Jews come about the age of Aisha getting married at 9 or 10 or whatever, we're going to have to okay, well, let's look at your scripture. And let's judge them fairly. Right? This is in your book. And each reference to each verse is there. I have in my other Bible, I've even written out all the verses to show the ages from the Bible. Again, the age of Aisha is not in the Quran, it's not in Marfu' Hadith. This is actually from biblical text itself. Yeah. Now, let's talk about the marriage of Joseph, according to Christian Saint Joseph, to Mary, according to them, the mother of God. Right? So there is an interesting book. I didn't bring this one with me, but I'm going to show you the scan. I brought another one that I'm going to show you, inshallah. And this is, they call it the Gospel of James, or so on. It has been printed, you can get it online. And this is one of the early works of Christian literature that currently is not in the Bible today, but it is used as a holy scripture to be one of the holy texts for them. And what does it tell us about the age of Mary at the time of her marriage? Do you guys see it?
12.
But she turned 12 years of age. Do you guys see it's on the screen share or no? And this is page 69, you have the book. That she got married at 12, but how old was Joseph?
167.
So, whoa.
Yeah.
There is an interesting book, and I want to give you these references so you can take them back with you. I don't want you to just be like, okay, he said this, but I want you to have these. And I'm going to give all these to Brother Taimur as a scans. So this is a book, and I brought it with me, I flew it with me. Historia Josephi Fabrio Ligrari. This is currently a manuscript in the Library of France. And I ordered it from there as they had it printed for me. The original obviously is in the Library of France. It's based on an original manuscript that was from Byzantine Egypt. Egypt, as you know, used to be ruled by the Byzantines. And it was in Greek, written in the 6th century. It has the Latin and Arabic manuscript here scanned. So we have both Arabic and Latin in this manuscript from the 6th century. Very interestingly, this is the earliest known account by Christians of the age of Joseph. Right? So we talk about the Catholic Encyclopedia and those books are all later. But the original for the age of Joseph, this is one of the earliest accounts ever given. So here, and I have the book with me, but I believe I've scanned it as well. So I'll share the scan. I believe you can see it now. So it mentions the age of the Maryam, Mubarakah, the Maryam, the Blessed Mother, Tahira, the purified, and Zakiyah, and so on. It mentions that she was 12 years old. How old was she? 12. She was 9 when she was given in to the monastery. 12 is when they wanted her to get married. Now, in the same book, later on, I will share that as well now. You guys see the new share? About Yusuf, which is Joseph, the Siddiq, the honest, the praiseworthy, they're called Saint Joseph. You know, he was 40 years old, 40 sana, before he was married, before he ever got married. And this is before, in the earlier time. And then his wife died, and he was 47. 49, sorry. He was 49 when his wife died. And then he waited until he married her, and 49 years after marrying his first wife at 40. So how old was he now? When his wife died, he was 89. So he got married at 40. 49 years after that, his wife died. He was 89. He waited sana wahda, another year. So how old is he now? 90 years of age when he married Maryam.
Yeah, 90.
This is according to Christian tradition. So a 90-year-old marrying a 12-year-old. How would that be in America today? Right? So when you talk about this, let's talk about it. You know, if you want to take this from a religious perspective, then according to Christians and Jews, according to the Bible, Rebecca is married at 3 years of age to a 40-year-old man. Right? If you want to take it especially towards Mary, the mother of God, according to them, and Saint Joseph, you know, the one who raised Jesus, 90-year-old marrying a 12-year-old, will that be legal in America today? So, these are good references for you to have and to keep to be able to answer these things. Aisha radiallahu anha, alhamdulillah, she was of age to be married according to the customs of the time. As people tell us, well, Mary was married at 12 because at that time it was perfectly normal for a 12-year-old to get married. Okay, I'm okay with that. If you're okay with a 90-year-old marrying a 12-year-old, then why would you have a problem with the marriage of Aisha radiallahu anha? So these are all in accordance to the urf and adat, the customs of the time. Now, I wanted to discuss these kinds of points just because they come up all the time. But one of the things I wanted to discuss of things that people throw at us as criticisms or as questions, as, I don't know, they think they have us on, is science. I love this. You tell somebody about religion, I believe in science. Okay, I believe in science too. Like, what does that mean? Right? You know? I believe in science. Okay, not to read it. All right. So, when you say you believe in science, what is science? Go ahead. Scientific method is a tool that science uses, but what is science? Go ahead.
An explanation for everything.
No, science can't explain everything. Science
That's
can't.
what they did.
But that's not what it is. So go ahead.
Science is the current human understanding of the how things happen, but not why they happen.
Kind of. Anybody else? Go ahead. Tests and trials, but for what?
Yes, same thing. So my opinion is it's just a bunch of theories until maybe we come across some
Maybe logic. Logic.
information that might render it true.
Go ahead.
Science and
We
logic.
should use the scientific method to understand our reality.
All right.
Logic.
Well, logic isn't science.
Yes.
Many things in science are illogical, right?
A way to study the physical world.
Thank you. It's a way to study the physical world using observation. Right? I'm giving a simple, you can Google it for more, right? The scientific method is a system used, right, to understand the physical world around us. So, for example, if I tell you that this book false, is that true?
Maybe, yeah.
Well, maybe, right? That's in science, we would say maybe. We would say, well, let's test it. Right? Can we show repeatability? Well, it fell again. Let's try it again. Yeah, it falls. Yeah, right? So the scientific method is I have a hypothesis. My hypothesis is that when I drop this book, it's going to fall. Right? Now, we need to do a controlled environment. I could take this into space and drop it, and it will float, right? So we could say, okay, well, there is a control we could throw in there, which it doesn't always fall. Now, why does it fall?
Gravity.
That's a theory. In science, we cannot prove it's gravity. But we can have a theory that there is a force called gravity. And how would we prove that? Well, we can show repeatability. It's a scientific fact that it does fall unless you have, like, no atmosphere and so on. But a theory now is that the center of the earth has this, core that pulls. That's a theory in science. And we can test it. And we can have controls, right? So science doesn't really tell you why, as Temur mentioned as well. And science doesn't even explain everything, but it does have observation. And I have nothing against that. I'm 100% pro-science, right? But what people don't understand is, can science tell you right from wrong? No. Is it scientifically wrong to kill somebody? No. When you stab somebody or shoot somebody, they die. We can prove that. We can take a bunch of people and shoot them, right? In an experiment. But is it wrong? Science cannot tell you. Go ahead.
Even in social, like Darwinism, it's encouraged survival of the fittest. You're actually
Well, Darwin, we'll get into evolution in a minute, but let me just get through a little bit of understanding what science is first, because when people say I believe in science, they think as if that's like a replacement for morality, which it isn't, right?
Yeah, because there's no morals in science.
There are no morals in science. There are no rights, there are no wrongs. There's only observation. If somebody, I don't know, mention anything too wild, but if somebody does the worst filthy things, science can't tell you it's wrong, right? In fact, if you take the theory of evolution, a lot of what Darwin theorized, those are not facts, those are theories, you wouldn't accept as a society today. Darwin, if you look at his writings, he felt men were more evolved than women. They were a higher species. Try saying that nowadays on TV, you don't get canceled, right? He felt certain races were more evolved than other races. He was a staunch racist. And he would say the theory of evolution proves that certain races are more evolved and superior to other races. Try that on TV today, right? When people say, I believe in evolution, you don't really. If you understood the theory of evolution as Darwin had explained it, there's many aspects you would not believe in today. Now, the theory of evolution, is it a scientific fact? It's not provable, right? So it's not a fact. It's a theory. In fact, the theory changes continuously, right? When I was going to school, I was told that we were primates, and then we became Neanderthals, and then we became humans. And they used to have this chart in my science class, you can Google it right now, and they would have like a monkey-looking primate, and then it would be like this Neanderthal, the big head, and then it would be this guy with a briefcase walking out, and it's like, this is how humanity became. And they taught us this in school, in science class. And today they say, nah, just kidding. We're wrong. Neanderthals were at the same time as Homo sapiens and humans and this and that. And they're like, yeah. And then like, we found this skull, it was a Neanderthal. They're like, nah, that was an ape. Sorry, we got it wrong, you know. A lot of what we're told as evidence for evolution has already been debunked by scientists themselves, right? The missing link is still a missing link, right? So the theory of evolution is a theory. Now, do animals adapt to their environment? Yes. Right? Allah is al-Bari. He is the one who evolves and grows His creation. He is the Khaliq. He is the Razzaq. He's the one that makes sure that you get your rizq. So if there is an animal that needs a longer beak to get to his rizq, Allah is the one that evolves that creature, and that's a proof and an evidence of an existence of God, not the other way around. Let me explain how. What do evolutionists tell us? How do species evolve? Huh? Mutation, but what type of mutation? Random. Right? So what does that mean? According to evolutionists, we are constantly evolving in a random manner, no systematic manner. Right? Because if it's systematic, then who controls it? So that means many of us should have horns. Some of us should have feathers. Some of us should have claws. Right? Because it's random. How many of you have tails? Not a tailbone, but a tail. Right? How many of you can fly? Right? Not on a plane. Right? So what does that mean? If it was random mutation, then each one of us, or at least us as a species, would randomly be mutating in different manners. Why do we all have two eyes? Right? Somebody get an eye poked out or something, but regularly we all have two eyes. None of us randomly had three eyes. Right? Why do we all have two arms and two legs and one nose and one mouth and two ears? Why do we have hair on top of our head? Right? Why don't we randomly, right? Not all of us. I still got hair on my head. Right? So why don't we have, hairy elbows, right? If it was random mutation, then it would randomly give you things that wouldn't be beneficial for you even, right? How could randomly a mother develop breast milk? This question destroys atheists, evolutionists, right? Because the next concept in evolution is the survival of the fittest, or the natural selection, right? Meaning that if you have a random mutation that helps you survive, and I don't, then I would die out, and you would survive, and the species from then on would have your mutation. Okay. So if this human species, or any other species, or any animal, could survive without being mammals, meaning without breastfeeding their children, then there'd be no need for it. Then that would not, because there are animals, or there are reptiles and things that don't breastfeed, and their young do survive. So there is no selection, natural selection here. Then randomly, how would milk appear in the breast of a mother only when she's pregnant with a child? Like, that makes absolutely no evolutionary sense. Right? And who makes that decision? How do we as a species decide that, hey, let's do two eyes, guys? I'm not down with a 3 or 4. 8 eyes like spiders, nah, we want to do 2, right? Who makes that decision? Did we have a meeting? All the humans on Earth and say, hey guys, let's get some wings. I like wings, I want to fly, right? I'm sick of paying those airline tickets, right? No. So that means all these theories, when you actually walk through them, they make no sense. Now, I'm going to put a challenge, and this is recorded. And I say this all the time, so it's recorded all the time. To any evolutionist, explain to me the minimum gene concept in accordance with the rules of evolution. We cannot prove the theory of evolution in a controlled environment, peer-reviewed, scientific method using clinical trials. Meaning, if I was to give you a species and tell you in a controlled environment, show me that species, turn into another species, it cannot be done, has never been done. What we can prove using the scientific method in a controlled environment is what's called a minimum gene concept. And you can Google this, you can look it up. Where the smallest living single cell organism needs a minimum set of genetics to survive. And they have taken a cell and taken genetics out and seen it collapse in a controlled environment. So they said, the theory is that at least 200 sets of genetics proven to be, from the scientific tests that were done on it, not less than 300 some odd genetics were needed. So the question to the evolutionist would be, the first living cell, who put that minimum set of genetics? If they evolved, then it could not have, because less than that minimum set, it could not survive. We can test that. That means the first living cell had to have had that minimum set of 300 some odd genetics in place already for it to survive. Who created that? Go ahead. Allah. There you go. Ready for the Shahada now, huh? Arabic first or English first? Right? So these are things I want you to take back. I want this to be a training, a Dawah workshop. I want you guys to take this knowledge back with you. I'm gonna end because we're coming to the end. I wanted to go over some Bible contradictions, but we won't have time this time. Maybe Temur never invites me, so next time, I'm just kidding. Next time we can do one, especially on the Bible. But I do want to share some verses of the Quran that I would like for you guys to mark and share with people when you're giving dawah. Yeah. And I was going to bring it up on the screen as well, which I can. This is an ayah in Surah Anbiya where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the creation of the day and the night and the sun, of the moon. What's interesting is yasbahun is that they are floating in an orbit. Now, why is that a miraculous verse? When we talk about scientific miracles, some people don't understand what that term means, right? We don't mean that the Quran is a book, a textbook of science for you to go and do, home experiments with. No. That means there are things in the Quran that are today considered scientific facts. Not just theories, things that have been proven, right? Through observation, that could not have been known to people in the time of the Prophet ﷺ in the place and environment that he was at, right? One of them being the sun having an orbit. Now, we can argue about the moon having an orbit, something you could observe in a way, right? The planet having an orbit, which again, the Arabs didn't know. The Arabs were not astronomers, they weren't philosophers, they were only good at poetry and fighting each other. That's all they were good at, to be honest. No, seriously, that's all they were good at. They weren't good at math, they weren't good at science, they weren't Greek, they weren't Roman, they weren't the Hindus. The Hindus had, math, concept of zero and all that. The Greeks had philosophy, and the Romans had their philosophy. They were not their own issues, but The Arab were good at poetry and they fought each other. They weren't even united. They didn't have a king. They didn't have an army. They couldn't fight the Romans. They couldn't fight the Persians. Allah brought the Prophet ﷺ with them and raised them, and that's it. So the Arab had no idea about these things. But you could argue and say, well, maybe they saw the moon and the cycles and this, okay. But the sun having an orbit, until very recently, even scientists said the sun doesn't have an orbit. It does not move. It's stationary. Until we got certain Hubble telescopes and things, and we looked at all these images and said, you know what, the sun does have an orbit. And today it's considered a scientific fact. Something has been observed that the sun has an orbit, and we can prove it through observation and so on. And they said it is a very slow orbit, and it would be impossible without the technology today for us to even know. How would the Prophet ﷺ have known this? Right? These are evidences you can put forward when discussing Islam and science and the Quran and its miracles. Now, I'm going to try to keep this on the screen share and give you another verse.
في برضه يكور الليل على النهار ويكور النهار على الليل. الآية بتقول كده يعني بيجوا ورا بعض كده. في عارف الكرة ولا
This is Surah Quran, the 53rd ayah. The Marj al-Bahrain is well known about the merger of the two bodies of water, one fresh and palatable, the other salty and bitter, placing between them a barrier they cannot cross. Now,
no mix.
Today, we know this. It's a scientific fact, something we can go and see ourselves. But the Prophet ﷺ had never been to a place with salt water. You know, where he was around the Red Sea, around Mecca, around Medina, around Hijaz, there's no salt water. So how would he know that there is a barrier, an invisible barrier between salt water and sweet water that comes together, that there is no physical barrier, but Allah has made it, that those don't mix? And imagine if it did. Imagine if all water could mix. Like if I take a bathtub and I put fresh water in it and I put salt water, what happens? It all becomes salty. Okay? But out with the ocean and seas and rivers, Allah has put an invisible barrier there that stops salt water and sweet water from mixing. This is in the Quran, and the Prophet ﷺ could not have known that. Right? So these are things that in your da'wah you can present to people. And there are many others about the heavenly bodies being gases, and the mountains being pegs and waves under the ocean. Someday we can go into more. But these are things to utilize in your da'wah, to show the Quran had information the Prophet ﷺ could not have had at his time. Inshallah, I'm going to stop here and open up for some questions and answers, and then well, about 10 minutes of that, and then we'll be wrapping it up, inshallah. I think the brother was first.
I think they don't mix, it's just that here's, I think it was kind of like metaphorical.
No, they don't mix. I've actually been. Yeah. If you go to the end of the Red Sea, for example, where it starts to hit the Arabian Sea, then goes out to the, I don't know which ocean is there, but right, not the Atlantic, but Indian Ocean. Yeah.
Here's that there's two sides.
No, you can go out there. It's pretty cool. You can see difference in color.
Different
Yeah,
color.
yeah.
Yeah, they go there and they touch, but they don't mix.
I have photos on lunch. You can see it very good.
Yeah, I've personally been there.
I know what you mean. I agree. I've seen like photos where like they're side by side. Okay.
That's it. Yeah. And the Quran mentioned it, even though the Prophet ﷺ had never been to a place that it was that to be true. How would he have known that?
To what extent is it our responsibility to da'wah in places such as examples in our classrooms, like a college or a public school, and like sports teams or whatever clubs or groups we might be a part of? And what's a good way to kind of give da'wah in those settings?
To what extent is it our responsibility? 100% it's our responsibility. Allah put it upon us. You know, when He says, "Qul hadi sabili adu ila Allah," say, "This is my way. I call towards Allah. Ala basira, upon sure knowledge. Ana wa man ittaba'ani," me and whoever makes my obedience. So every follower of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has that responsibility. Rasulullah said, "Ballighu anni walau ayah," go convey upon me, even if it's a verse, it's a taklif, it's a responsibility given to us. Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat. There's so many ayat and hadith, but how to do it? Use hikmah, wisdom. Don't just walk in, you're all going to hell. No, that's not how you do it, right? But you know, you bring up conversations. If somebody says, "Oh man, look at that sunrise, it's so beautiful." Say, "Yeah, that is that. Who made that? Who made those colors? How did that get to be?" Like, I work in the scientific industry, right? We work in medical devices, clinical trials and all of that. And many times, you know, when COVID was a big thing, I was sitting in a presentation by a professor from PhD researcher from UCSD in San Diego, and they were talking about the coronavirus and how it works, and you know, it's amazing structure and how it, you know, doesn't show signs because it doesn't want to get caught and all this stuff. And I was like, that's amazing. Can we make something like that? Like, can we as humans? They were like, no way, it's too complex, it's too amazing, we can't make anything like it. Well, who made it then? You know, and they get stuck with that, right? And I use that opportunity at work to give da'wah all the time. Yeah. Fadal Habib, they had their.
This is pretty like a specific question, but in the Quran it talks about the creation of humans and from dust. I remember there was a research paper in like the 1950s where it talked about how even like our body contents contains like cosmic crucibles from like star dust, saying that originally what's inside of us is also like dust as well. Is the Quranic like is it referring to only the creation of Adam, or could this also be referring to like our creation from dust?
So I mean, Adam alayhi salam was made from turab, from earth, right, from dust, and from that came the rest of mankind. So that building block is there, right? But again, we don't say dust like you know, the dust you kind of dust off outside, but as a building block of humanity, that is true, right? Of course, and then we come from that, right? And we go back to that. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So back to the ayah about the orbits and stuff. I remember learning when I was a kid that way back in the day, people used to believe that the sun and the moon used to revolve around the earth because they didn't understand how orbit worked.
Yeah.
How would you respond to somebody who brings that up, that, you know, back in the day they believed that the sun revolved or orbited around the earth? How would you?
So for them, then you would say, does the earth have an orbit? Do other planetary bodies have orbit? Because those people didn't believe in that, right? But the Quran tells us that all heavenly bodies have an orbit, right? All the planetary bodies have an orbit. So you could not have known that, right? Many earlier civilizations did have theories, right? How the body works and so on, but they would be wrong in a lot of it. The Quran is always right, right? So if you look at the scientific method, right? And I ask you what's going to happen in the future, you could take a guess and get it right, right? That doesn't make it a fact. But if every time you guessed you got it right, you know, after 50 repeatability, we would say that this is a fact, that he knows something we don't, right? That's why like Nostradamus and all these people, they would get some things right and some things would just be, you know, wrong or very ambiguous or so on. So in the Quran, you go through each one of the scientific facts that are there that could not have been known. You would say, okay, if like other cultures there was guesswork, then some of them have to be wrong, right? And they're not. So how would that be? How can a man in the desert get it right every time? Then you couple that with prophecies. When the Prophet ﷺ prophesied the Muslims would be victorious on Istanbul. At that time they were starving in the Battle of Khandak and they had stones tied to their stomach. They couldn't imagine the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire falling, but the Muslims did. You know, we talked about the prophecies about the Romans and Persians, when they would battle and who would win in the Quran, every time it came true. So you put those forward, right? The sun having an orbit is a very recent discovery, right? If you look at earlier traditions, people would have some things like, you know, an eagle picks up the sun and takes it around, and Hindus would feel that the earth was sitting on a turtle's back, and, you know, all these weird ideas that the sun was between the two horns of a bull. All of that stuff was wrong. We figured it was wrong. But nothing in the Quran has been proven to be wrong.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
Do you plan on like putting out like the different controversies and stuff that you have marked in your Bible? I know I see your videos and stuff. That's been asked.
Yeah, so I've been planning on writing a book. Right? Some people say you should publish a Bible, but why publish a Bible? You know? I've been planning on writing a book where I put together, I have about 100 contradictions, and then I have certain verses that I've marked for like theological inaccuracies according to Christian current theology and what's in the Bible. So I plan on writing a book, inshallah. It's going to be free. I'm going to make it waqf and maybe make an app out of it as well. But just time has been killing me, you know.
The comment about printing the Bible, like you said, you bring a book that's theirs, right? It's not like your book that you wrote. So it's like it has more, I guess, legitimacy in the argument.
What do you
Maybe
mean?
that's what, like when you bring a book that's actually highlighted, then it shows the difference.
Yeah, but then they're going to say it's you guys' Bible, right? So instead I'll give you all the verses, you grab a regular Bible from the Christians and you mark it up yourself. Go ahead.
When you're doing dawah, right? Your time is very precious. Right? You want to, you see a conversation
كنت لما استنى كده استنى
What
يوقف
you
هنا
do is,
مشغول
you know,
في الوقت ده كده بصعب
Allah says,
So,
or sometimes people cannot get, their hearts are sealed. That, what what things do you look for to say, you know what, I'm not wasting my time?
so Allah tells us, "Ma alayna illa balagh al-mubin," right? It's not upon us except to clearly convey the message, right? So your job is to convey the message. That's it. And if somebody is not interested, Allah, you did your job, right? How do you evaluate when have you done that job and when do you still need to continue? It's going to take some soft skills, right? It's going to take some ability for you to evaluate situations. Sometimes, like you can see some of the videos, the person will come out very aggressive and they're not listen, and they end up taking the shahada, right? And at times we could bang our head against the wall, and you know. So we kind of evaluate, and sometimes like you see somebody and you're like, you know what? Hold on, you go your way, I'll go my way, no problem, you know. And sometimes we try to continue the conversation because we do notice a spark or a point where it's taking up interest. So those you have to kind of make a judgment call. There's no hard rule. It's not like 7 minutes and you're done. Because people are different, right? We've had people like Brother Richard. He came 3 times and argued with us and became Muslim and is a big da'i with us today. Yeah. We've had Christian pastors that came to New York, San Diego to debate and ended up becoming Muslim. At the same time, there's people, there's one guy, almost every other week, if not every week, he comes by our stall, and he's just an old guy that wants to talk, and we've talked to him like hundreds of times, and he doesn't want to change, he just needs somebody to talk to. So now when we see him, we're like, hey, how you doing? Sorry, we're busy.
We have a sister question.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the sister says, I think it's the same one from before who had the project. The professors also say that the reason why we don't have 3 eyes or wings, etc., is because that it doesn't provide help in survival or reproduction, and it is not advantageous to our survival. So that's why we don't have these extra body parts.
Excellent. So the question there would be that if they say that having additional eyes does not help a species survive, then why do spiders have 8? Right?
It's not random anymore.
It's not random anymore. And why do all spiders have 8? Right? So obviously there is, why do flies have like 1,000? Right? I don't know how many they have, but they have a lot, right? So obviously there is some survival benefit to it. And why would a species all have the same? Let's say if we had eyes in the back of our head. I think that would kind of help us out, right? Like, I've been attacked from the back before, when I was in high school, dude hit me with a baseball bat, and if I had eyes in the back of the head, I would have caught that, right? I mean, if we all came together, I think we'd be like, let's do it. I'd like some eyes in the back of my head, Next time I'm praying, I'm like, hey, I see you guys, man, right? But we don't, right? So that means it can't be random, right? If the idea is that everything is based on what you need for survival, then why do 2 species in the same environment have different skill sets or different things that develop, right? In Africa, for example, there are mice that are very small, that are that their survival skill is being small and fast. In the same environment, you have a lion that is huge, right? So why did one species go one way and the other both survive? Right? So all of that can't be random. Right? And if it is random, then we should be having mutations that are dying out. Right? Meaning some of us should have 3 eyes, and the one with 2 eyes will survive, and the 3 won't, so we'll make it. But how many people have 3 eyes here? Anything else in the sisters? Or?
That's all we have.
But the last question, then we'll wrap it up here. We'll do some administrative stuff.
Just a comment. For my own experience, my own grandmother, she's got an identical twin, and they have different birthdays on their documents.
Interesting.
And because one she registered when they got married, one got married in Jerusalem, one got married in Amman, Jordan. And when you go to get married, that's when you're given the ID cards, and the ID would tell you, oh, when did you get married? And when, how old are you? You register it. They don't know the month. They said it was winter of such and such year. So one's in November, one's in December.
SubhanAllah. Yeah, that's very good. That's in our time.
She's late 60s.
Very
Not that old.
interesting. How do you go ahead?
I have a really simple question.
Alright.
So they say, back in that era, slavery, was legal by those standards in those areas.
Yeah.
So, in Islam, I believe it says, that, you can have relations with the person who you own with your right hand.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you explain that? Slavery was legal, but how can you have relations with a slave? You only, do that within the confines of marriage.
So, regarding Islam and slavery, we've never had slavery in Islam, nor do we have it in the sense of Western slavery. Western slavery was not about prisoners of war. It was about an ethnic enslavement of people who were free people to be used as labor, right? Meaning, when Western traders went to Africa, they didn't go and have a war and take prisoners. They kidnapped people. Some of them were princes, some of them were scholars, some of them were regular people, and then it was racial. It's not like they went to Ireland and did it. They went to Africa, and they did enslave some people of other races like Native Americans and things as well, but it was racial. And they did have sex and rape of the slaves, George Washington himself, and you can read the documentation on that. Islam, we've never had that. Alhamdulillah. We've never had that. We've never had a racial slavery. We've never had slavery in that sense. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ